Today, we're going to be talking about reconciling, reconnecting with your family, and 3 strategies, including taking responsibility. I'm Marie Morin. I'm a therapist and a wellness coach. Let's get started. One of the biggest obstacles to reconciling is the notion that you had nothing to do with it. In fact, it's totally their fault. It's all about them. If you drop the blame altogether and say, this is a situation and this is what happened, and accept that fact, you're on your way to gaining insight into what successful reconcilers have been able to do. So there's 3 strategies. The first one is perspective taking. Now, this is really difficult because we perceive things from our perspective as a threat. If someone cuts off from us and we're not in an abusive situation, that's a totally different thing. But if we're not in an abusive situation, the threat of being in this estranged situation, meaning you're hurt, they don't want anything to do with you, or you don't want to have anything to do with them, there's a threat involved. This is uncomfortable. And so because of that, we pick up a defensive mechanism. We become defensive to protect ourselves. When we approach estrangement non-defensively, we can examine the facts as objectively as possible. We consider what was wrong with our strategies. We look for ways to improve and we make adjustments. Defensiveness, according to Pilmer, encourages us to selectively edit the information we receive and treat it as a fact. Seeing it as a fact, the events that happened, our perspective, helps us protect our self-esteem and helps us to discount the other perspective that may threaten a positive perception of ourselves. There is a desire to know. You may have even asked, what did I do? And you're thinking, I did nothing. But at the same time, there's this dismissal and a rationalization around the reasons given. I didn't do that. That wasn't me. I was always around. I was always supportive. But maybe this person is telling you, no, you weren't. They're saying you were always never, and you're arguing about, I can't look at myself in that perspective. I have to see myself and protect my positive perception. So many estranged people do send letters to their loved ones, to their estranged person, giving their side of the story, and it's dismissed or the person is accused of lying. Now, remember, we're not talking about cases of abuse, but in reality, in the course of a relationship, there are things that happen. There's specific moments. There's monumental moments, a moment where the straw that broke the camel's back. There was considerable conflict, differences in values, and personality conflicts that have led to the estrangement. For some, due to this protective mechanism of not wanting to see these things, it's not obvious that there were a number of different variables that had to do with the estrangement. So in video 14, you learned about how to reconcile and what successful reconcilers did. They didn't expect the other person to fully align to their narrative, right? But one of the key things in reconciling is to take responsibility for your part. How that fleshes out in different relationships is as varied as the many stories. However, the idea of taking responsibility for your part is very important because it gives you a perspective that we're going to learn, and you're going to want to watch to the end, of how important it is not to hold firm that you're completely blameless and this is all about the other person. To move forward in your exploration of the rift, you're going to have to take perspective of the other person. So what might that be about? This is not taking full responsibility for the whole thing. This is about merely looking, what was my role in the situation? And the way that you do that is by sitting and thinking, well, what might they be feeling about what happened? If there was a monumental event and all of the things that we discussed, there'd been conflict, there've been opportunities that were missed, there were messages going back, maybe some passive aggressive behaviors, maybe there was conversations. In any event, there were things that were happening, but it didn't happen in a vacuum and you were there, right? So what might the other person be thinking about your role? What might the other person be feeling? This is part of the work that successful reconcilers were able to come to once they moved out of being defensive and needing to protect themselves. They were ready to say, okay, I want to see my family member again. I want to do the work on my part instead of insisting that it's all their fault. So in this way, let's talk about empathy, because empathy is a cognitive skill that takes practice. It allows us to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, imagine their perspective and how they feel. You and your estranged person have very different psychological viewpoints. And this is what Pilmer says. If you want to have this skill, we need to come out of our limited self perspective. You choose to come out of your self-validating thinking. And sometimes that means speaking to others who don't also validate your perspective, so you can find within you the capacity to come out of your own hurt, anger, and betrayal. It's not easy to do this type of self-examination, but successful reconcilers say it is essential to move you out of the defensive and stuck mode. Strategy number 2 is to harness the power of writing. So this isn't about writing your grievances and then sending your estranged person a letter, but instead take on the other person's perspective. Just put yourself in their shoes for a minute and write from their perspective what their side of the story was. What might they have been thinking and feeling about the critical moments, about the smaller moments, about all the things that went on in the dynamic of your relationship? Imagine that you're your relative and you're speaking from their voice. Now, if this exercise is too difficult for you, you can try writing from a third person, a neutral, objective third person, how they might see their perspective. And this can also be helpful in enlarging your ability to see different narratives of the estrangement and what created the rift in the first place. One of the key pieces of this is to find calm. If you're really enraged, if you're really hurt still and you haven't grieved, you may not be ready for this because it hurts a lot to do this step. You may need to sit in the grief and allow yourself to process your emotions. When you are ready, come back to this step. But this is about finding calm. When you're ready, you will know. Find your calm. Take a couple of deep breaths. Watch my video about diaphragmatic breathing. Do what you can, and then bring yourself out of an emotional state and think, what might they be thinking and feeling? And feel. What was it for them? What could they have experienced? And Pilmer's third strategy is to expand your feedback loop. So what we do normally when there's been an estrangement is we talk to the people that we've collected in our family that agree with us, or we have our good friends that we might be speaking to us and they're parroting back everything we need to hear and want to hear. Oh, I understand, it hurts so much, and it does. And that's a good thing to get. But we tend to stay away from opportunities where someone might disagree with us and give us an alternative perspective. So one of the things that you can do, in addition to getting support where everybody is thinking along the same lines as you are, is to perhaps talk to a distant relative and tell them the situation, tell them what happened, and ask them if they're willing to give you their objective perspective. Or you can talk to friends in groups that have nothing to do with estrangement, where they might be able to relay feedback to you that gives you insight into what might have happened and what might be going on for your estranged person. Successful reconcilers are able to step back to move forward. They're able to look at the other person's perspective. They're able to write about it. In writing, they're processing emotions, not just about what they might be going through, but also looking at it in an empathetic way. What was the other person going through? What were they thinking? What were they feeling? And the third thing is they expanded their feedback loop. They weren't just getting the same messages over and over again. And here's the big one that I promised you. Successful reconcilers were able to abandon the need to be right. It goes back to the defensiveness. They didn't have to be right. They didn't have to push the blame all on the other person. They could accept responsibility by abandoning the need to be right and saying, you know what, I did do that. You know what, maybe I wasn't there all the time. You know what, maybe I could have done this or done that differently, and then helped keep the relationship intact. So key here is to abandon the need to be right. And what about expectations? Do you have expectations of your loved one that maybe are a little bit off the mark? Do you have expectations of yourself that may be off the mark? We're going to talk about that in my next video. Be sure to watch. Don't forget to get my ebook, Feeling Heartbroken and Alone, How to Pick Up the Pieces When You're Estranged. And hit the like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you can get more of these videos. See you in the next video.